I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the grainy photos, the blurry videos, and the same thing being repeated over and over and over again. Enough. But people are seeing something. They're experiencing things. And it's time we start collecting data from it, gathering real information from these stories. Dr. Jim Segala, a physicist who worked alongside Dr. Hal Puthoff and helped analyze data connected to Skinwalker Ranch, is on a mission to do exactly that, to take these experiences and to turn them into real-world data. In this episode, we break down how the system works, what it's actually detecting, and the moments where the data starts to line up in ways that are very hard to ignore. This is no longer about belief. This is about turning your experiences into real, measurable data. Are you willing to volunteer?
My name is Jim Segala. I'm a physicist and also I have a degree in engineering. My specialty is basically numerical analysis of strange data. I started off working for a gentleman by the name of Hal Puthoff, who ran a lab in Austin, Texas, and I worked for him for probably 11 years. And in that lab, you do things that are kind of out of the ordinary, crazy. People come to you and say, look, I don't get this. Can you help us figure it out? So I was exposed to a lot of things. Some of the things that I did get exposed to that really shocked me was a lot of people that have these profound experiences end up having some type of medical after effect or some residual on their bodies, a lesion or tinnitus or bloody nose or something like that they couldn't explain. They would go to their attending or they would go to the doctor and say, what the hell happened to me? I just had this thing happen to me, and all of a sudden, I've got these problems. I've got this rash on me, or I've got this lesion on me that wasn't there before this experience. But, I saw something, either a craft or an orb, or, there's a whole extent of things that you can do. But it was like very strange. So first of all, you can't be making it up. Your body can't spontaneously just make these things happen to you. It doesn't have the ability to do that per se. And so it was very curious. So that's the thing that got me going into this whole space, was that these people that reporting and giving their basically their narratives of explaining about these experiences are also having medical effects. Now, that's the pinnacle, right? Because everything is a pyramid. These are the top-notch, ending up in the hospital, spending a week in the hospital because they had all these symptoms. But trickle down, we said, look, if we have 100 of these things, there must be thousands of them that didn't end up in the hospital, that just had a small something happen to them. So that data showed us that the information was real, that we were in a space where we know we have a really nice, we have a nice place to do experiments in and have people give us their data. And then also the questions are, basically, it's something that humanity wants to know. So it not only was a good subject matter, it was, when you do finally solve it or you do come up with something, it's going to affect humanity. So that's something that was very, pulls you in and sucks you in and gets you going. So, I did that for probably 10 years, got funded by Hal's group. Hal was very, very well funded. And then subsequently from that, we just continued and you started bringing in people, and people kept calling and asking, can we get involved? Because what it turns out is that a lot of people get scared of these experiences they have. They end up having an experience that maybe frightens them or something, though they use the ability to understand what's going on in their space to basically come to terms with it. So that's what really got me going. And, I bring all my tools to bear that I learned in school and in my career. So right now it's one of those things that I'm just investigating this on a worldwide basis. We're all over the world now. And so that's what I do. We're looking to solve the problem of or solve the questions why people have these experiences and what does it mean? Is it something out there that's doing this to us?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have an experience at all in your entire life, or was it just the data itself that fascinated you, that there was this large data set of individuals that had these experiences, that had these similar traits? Or did something personally happen to you that kind of was a catalyst for it?
Yeah, so it was more the data really shocked the hell out of me. I didn't really expect to see that. You don't really know what you're going to get into when you start looking at data, and when you start combing through this. Because I looked at, so Hal Puthoff was Bigelow's science advisor when he had Skinwalker Ranch. So I got all that data. So he brought all that data. So I was hired really to sift through the data, look for anomalies. So I started seeing some crazy stuff. It's like, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture. So you start sifting, you start talking to the scientists that were there and all this stuff. So you say, wow, this is really weird. So it was really the data that brought me in. But as I started going to these places and experiencing this stuff and looking at, there's these big question marks that come up. Like I was at Blind Frog Ranch several times doing investigations, and weird stuff would happen. Like all of the noise, environmental noise would go away, or the person next to me would like just basically go into a catatonic shock and not be able to talk to. So, and that's stuff you just can't explain. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Was there a moment when you were hired by Hal Puthoff and you were looking at the data that I picture, this is so silly, but this is how my brain works. Like I picture like a movie scene where like you're looking through the data, or you're having a scan through something, and then it identifies a trend, and you just had this like, oh my God moment. Did that happen, or was it more of like a gradual thing?
Yeah. So it's funny because my first education was engineering. I don't know if you're familiar with engineers. Engineers are very pragmatic.
Yep.
Everything's a bolt, everything's a nut. So, I mean, basically, everything is definable, and, it goes the way you're supposed to go.
Materialistic.
But, yeah, so, and then my next education was in physics. In physics, everything is abstract. Everything is like, okay, quantum mechanics is not really there. So I usually approach problems as an engineer, but when you work for Hal, I mean, you bring him to something and you say, look, Hal, I don't understand what this is. And then he sits back and he looks at you and says, well, what do you think it is? I mean, what could it possibly be? He says, you have to figure out what are the possibilities. So you start looking at it more abstract, and you start looking at it in a way that a physicist would do it, and not so much an engineer would do it. So that was a big turning point for me, is like with his guidance, he kind of helps you down the road of looking at these anomalies, because he's been seeing anomalies for, all his career. He was, all the stuff he did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. He's really, with all the remote viewing stuff, I know he's
remote
involved
viewing
into.
Was a surprise to him. Yep, all that stuff.
That's crazy. And it sounds also too like what you're describing as a scientist. Isn't it kind of like the holy grail? Because you have like the biggest question that has ever existed is, are we alone in the universe? Why are we here? All these types of things. And to be given kind of a data set and a task to try to solve it, I mean, that's the definition of science, is the ultimate question, and how do we monitor it?
He had tons of money from a very wealthy European that had that problem. He had an experience, and he said, look, I don't get this. I mean, we have to solve this thing. So he went to Hal and some other people and said, look, you have to help me solve this thing. So he put up the money for years to help this question get put into the mainstream.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I have a favor to ask. If you're enjoying our content so far and you want to help support our channel, really the best thing you can do right now is hit the follow button down below. Making these videos is very time consuming. It requires an enormous amount of work. And if you like this channel to grow and to keep producing reliable content, the best thing you can do is hit the follow button. And the next best thing you can do is share it with a friend. The more followers we get, the more views we get, the more YouTube will start working with us, and that'll allow us to push out more content. So thank you for at least considering it. It means the world to us. And now back to the video. Next, I asked Jim about something called MUPAS, which stands for Multimodal Unidentified Phenomenon Autonomous Sensor. That is a mouthful. But it's a system that he designed to take these experiences and turn them into raw, measurable data. And for someone who's been working in tech for well over a decade, I was kind of nerding out a little bit about this part. And it aligns so much with the mission of this show, to find out the truth of what is going on here. So when did the MUPAS device come into play? Was that your initial way of trying to figure out and try to collect data and more data?
Yeah, well, the argument was, look, people are having these experiences and then getting some physical change to their body. So we knew that our brain wasn't really capable of doing it. So I said, well, what's the vector? How did it actually? So when people get a rash or people get something caused it, right? Some bacteria or fungus or something like that. But you say, well, what's the vector? How did it get into your body? So it must have come in from the outside. So that's the first experiment we tried, is to understand or get statistical data to figure out, is this something is the vector from outside? Is it coming from the outside? And then you find out, oh yeah, there's a good indication that it is. So wait a minute, if it's coming from the outside, can we measure it at the same time they're having the experience? And that was like a complete game changer. So we said, okay, let's build something that we could put next to these people, give them a little bit of space so they can have their experience, but at the time constantly read everything in the environment and see if we can actually figure out a anomalous signal in that data that corresponds or correlates to when they have these experiences. And that's what we started doing around 2018, 2017 era. And that's when the data started pointing to, in fact, something on the outside is making these people have this experience. They're not spontaneously just having this rare or this random neuron fire and all of a sudden they have these crazy experiences. They're actually, something from the outside is pinging them to, it might be a communication, it might be, who the hell knows? We don't really know. All we know all we're reading now is that it's happening. So that's the incarnation of MUPAS. It wasn't called back. It was just a rudimentary piece of equipment, and then it evolved over the years. More people got involved, more people got interested, and then we said, okay, we gave it a name. We kind of standardized on it. We distributed it to the previous study. We did 35 people or something like that.
Okay,
and that's the incarnation of it.
That's really fascinating. Could you break down the current iteration of the latest MUPAS? Like what kind of sensors does it have in it? All that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so you basically say, look, I think my hypothesis is that some energy from the outside is coming in and affecting people and making them have these experiences. So you have to have a wide variety of sensors. You don't really know what pings. So you put the electromagnetic, you put the higher energy stuff, the higher than the light energies. You look for environmental signals like maybe the pressure differentials. You look for infrasound, subsonic stuff, things. You look for any kind of signal. So there's a wide, and I can actually, I can share my screen and show you exactly what there is. But what you want to do is you want to get as many sensors, like you have the acceleration vectors, you have the magnetic vector, the gyroscopic vectors, all of those you constantly monitor to see what's going on. And it turns out that you can then look at those there's tons of software tools out there to say, look, here's a standard, here's a day that nothing happened, here's a day that we think something happened, go in there and find any anomalies, and it does a really good job of pulling out anomalies and saying, here's something suspicious, here's something suspicious. So, it's just a very wide collection of sensors that go into this. And then, of course, what we did is we said, look, we're going to allow people to plug in extra stuff on the back. So there's a little port in the back of it. In fact, would you mind if I shared my screen?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
12 seconds later.
This is right now what we consider the Mini. And Mini is a device that has all of these sensors. So it's got tons of sensors on it. It's got microwave, got gamma, it's got the accelerometer, magnometer, gyroscope, the gravity sensor, acoustics, all these. So this is all built into the device. And it just sits there on your table. It doesn't really bother anybody. And basically, the screen is off, and it just sits there and collects all day long. And then back up in the cloud, we send everything up to the Azure cloud services. Up there, we're running constantly doing AI. Well, not constantly. We do at night. We do a big AI analysis of all the data that comes in, and we're looking for things like, actually, here's a very interesting one. So this is Blind Frog. Oh, okay, this is very interesting. So this is Blind Frog Ranch, and it's basically a look at data. This is actually weird. So this is Blind Frog Ranch. Basically, we have a device on there, and we have some pretty high electromagnetic spikes. There might be somebody there right now. I have no idea. So this is another device that we have that has not so much. I mean, this is small little spikes. But it's actually looking at these waveforms constantly switch over to real time. So looking at these waveforms constantly, and it's constantly sending all this data. But at the same time, these people are putting in narratives. They're actually logging their narratives, showing people what they're doing. While I was walking outside, I felt lightheaded. When I looked up, I saw a craft floating in the air. It timestamps those, puts those in, and then it correlates all these with something that might be going on in the data. So what you want to do is you want to have two things, right? You want to have, for a real scientific piece of data, you want to have something that somebody observed, and at the same time, something that happened in the background, some anomalous signal. So we run it up, and we take their narratives and we extract all the information using standard AI tools, and then we say, okay, well, this was interesting. They saw something, and this is the category, and then we marry it to something some anomaly that happened in the data. In the first study, what we found, we're very specific about what we consider an anomalous event. We can, they can have all these narratives. If nothing happens in the data, we really don't have any correlations. So out of all the data for 3 years, we found 300 cases, individual cases where simultaneously people reported that they have an anomaly, and at the same time the data was collected by the device to show an anomaly. So I know it just sounds pretty low because we have tons and tons of these. We have, I think, 4,000. We had 4,000 narratives entered during the first 3 years, and only found 300. But I mean, it was a lot.
That doesn't sound low to me personally. That sounds like a pretty high ratio.
But it would, so what we're shooting for is, so that's about 4.5 sigma. I don't know if you know what sigma is. Sigma is a if you were going to repeat if I was going to tell you that I did an experiment and I said to you, go repeat this experiment, 4.5 sigma is the Gaussian that says you will get the same amount of data that I get.
Right.
So we were like 4.5. We were shooting for 5, which is like the golden rule. We didn't come close to that. That's why we kicked off the second version of this thing. But now we have almost 300 people in the study, and we have 40,000 different narratives that every night we're spending a fortune on AI because it's very expensive to run AI. I don't know if anybody knows this, but it's very expensive to run AI.
Especially at that magnitude.
With the big GPUs, yeah. So we got all these things. Anyway, so we're getting more. So that 300 number is growing significantly now that we're... But we've actually dropped our requirement, or we actually stiffened our requirement. So it really has to be a solid piece of data for it to go in, because what we want to do is we want to publish. If you're going to publish, you have to have perfect data. So that's what we're going for.
That's so exciting. I have like about a bazillion questions flooding through my mind right now. So I guess the first one I'll say is, is there one experience that sticks out that is, probably the most impactful one? Or maybe another way of answering that question is there a common thread that you're seeing, that maybe there's something to do with, RF fields or is there, like with the magnetometer, is there like a certain thing you're noticing that when people see these crafts or see an anomaly or experience something that, a physical sensation, that there always seems to be this one thing that is like a trend? Or have you been able to identify that?
Yeah. So of all the sensors that are in this, we didn't know when we initially did this, we didn't know which ones are going to be the good ones, right? You never really know. So you put them all in there. It turns out that the gyroscope, because of just the way what it's reading, right? Gyroscope is reading twisting, right? Twisting of the metric. So our space-time is twisting a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean so slightly it's ridiculous. But these things can read it. That's the one that seems to ping the most.
Okay, let me pause here for a second. Out of all the sensors on this MUPAS device, the gyroscope is the one that he says is pinging the most. That's crazy. It doesn't measure light. It doesn't measure sound. It measures rotation and your position in space. Because what Jim is saying is that during these experiences, the MUPAS device is detecting anomalies with the gyroscope, with the person's position in space, a kind of twisting in the environment. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know all the physics behind that because I am not smart enough to understand that. The only point that I'm trying to prove is that if he's correlating people's experiences with anomalies with the gyroscope, aka position in space, what does that mean? It means that it's not just what people are seeing. There's actual data behind it that is correlating to what's happening to them. That's incredible. It means the interaction is real. So we're not just talking about lights in the sky anymore. We're talking about something that may affect space itself, even if it's in a way that we don't fully understand yet. And that's where it starts to get really hard to ignore.
You asked about, one of the profound pieces of data that we collected. We had a family that lived down south in I think in Richmond, and they were having very bad times. So the child was getting nosebleeds constantly, headaches constantly, and the parents were all constantly finding like plugs undone, and they would come home, nobody in the house, things were a mess and stuff like that. So they were having all these problems. They had a device and they were recording constantly, putting in narratives. And then one evening it was one of those migraine level headaches that the kid went like completely catatonic, and there was an enormous spike in the data, and it was just one of those things that's like, oh my god, this is like a real piece of data. And it was just so profound that you just couldn't discount it. They weren't even home when this whole thing happened, and yet they were just going. The kid was like basically had a horrible time. They had nosebleeds and all this kind of stuff happened to them. So, and then that subsequently went into a file that was given to one of their investigators. So they had some investigators come in and say, "Look, this is crazy. We can't live here anymore." So they had to actually move.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and that was, in fact, it was somebody that, I didn't really know them very well. It was somebody else that was just in the study, but they ended up basically becoming, real big time in trying to investigate this. And so it turned them to say, look, I know this is real now. I'm going to go try to figure this out myself. So they became a really, profound experiencer. But one of the interesting things that's been going on lately is that a lot of people have been contacting us because they want to conduct CE5. Do you know what a CE5 is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So and now there's a CE6, which is another kind of thing that's a little bit different, but we are having incredible reactions on the data when they start doing their stuff. So we went to the Ozarks just recently, and they did a CE6. A whole bunch of them went out to a place. So we said, okay, here, take one of these, just put it on the picnic table and just leave it alone, don't do anything. And they came back, I showed them the data from it, and during their period, we had 3 or 4 sensors that just went completely nuts, like the gyroscopic sensor. I mean, there's no physical way that you can make the gyroscopic sensor go crazy unless you had this enormous magnet that you were, putting over the top of it or something like that. It was just on the picnic table. And then we had another person in Australia that did the same thing. They did a CE5, which is a little bit different, but at the same time that they were doing it, they got a big lift in the data, and it was very, very surprising. They basically emailed me and said, we did this thing. Is this possible that we can have all this variation in data when the thing was like 30, 40 feet away? No one was near it, and the answer is what else could have caused that? So. Anyway, so the data is actually very, very surprising that's coming from this.
How do you account for like malfunctions in the sensors? Because I mean, technology. I mean, we both know there tends to be occasional malfunctions where things it's not operating correctly. You might get this really weird spike when nothing really happened, or maybe even the software malfunction or something. So how are you accounting for that in the data?
Well, that's where you start saying, I need two sources, right? You need the experimental stuff, and you need to have multiple channels. So we say we have to have at least anomalies on 3 channels, right? So inside the device, there's different chips that are recording. All right, so you say, well, the common denominator there is the power supply and stuff like that. So we say we need at least 3 of those to ping at the same time. So 3 different chips, basically. But also we say it has to correlate with what the person is saying who is not, doing anything to the machine. So that's what I'm talking about statistics. It has to be like perfect because you have to have 3 anomalies happen. Like for instance, if you look at this thing, like this is anomaly, but you didn't get anything in the gyroscope, so this would get thrown away. So you'd have to have something happen in the gyroscope at the same time, and then there's no infrasound. So maybe maybe the accelerometer had something, but then at the same time, somebody would have had to come over here and recorded, during a period of time that's surrounding it, that they had an experience. That means that something happened that they didn't understand.
Right.
So that's how you say I got rid of. That's why I only got 300 out of thousands. Yeah. So that's how you get rid of the noise. But then again, the AI helps you because you said you studied this. I mean, so you have these cases where you could do. You can look at things. You can look at the residue, and you can actually find where you have anomalies. It turns out that AI is really good at finding things that are out of the ordinary. So you can say, here's the ordinary, and you give it something else. You say, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't follow your ordinary waveform. There's something wrong with this, and it's really good at that.
Before we get into the AI, because I want to dive into that deep, I think, but if you're open to that, but you kind of answered one of my other questions too, because I was wondering, like, do you test this like the MUPAS devices in just normal environments? But it sounds like you may not even have to because you're correlating the data with what they're experiencing. So if you just gave it to someone and just said, hey, just keep this on you for a week and not tell them anything, it wouldn't really matter because you may get some anomalies in the data, but if you're not correlating it to an experience, you're just throwing it out anyway. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and then of course, with the first thing you do, and I tell everybody because they want to say, "Oh, do I get any data? I don't get any alerts," because we send out these notifications if we do get this ping, and they first get it and they set it up and they don't get anything. I said, "Well, the first thing it does, it spends about 2-3 weeks just getting noise floors. It wants to understand what the noise floor is, and that's what the AI is doing, right? So you say, here's what's normal." And then after a while it builds up and says, okay, well, wait a minute, that's not normal. I've spent 3 weeks looking at normal, and now you give me this thing. It says, okay, well, that's kind of weird. It's like when you do AI for like visual stuff. You can look for anomalies in visual stuff by saying, okay, here's a scene. It says, oh, wait a minute, that's a bird. Okay, I've seen that bird before, so every time I see a bird, I'm going to consider it a bird. But if you give it enough stuff, you say, wait a minute, that's something I've never seen before. And then it comes back and it says, well, this is something. I said, well, that's an airplane. So, oh, okay. And this is the AI. Yeah. This is basically how you train AI.
It's machine learning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the way you train. So you do it on like, wait a minute, something's weird. Oh, but wait a minute, that's okay. And then it learns and learns and learns. And when that one orb comes by, it says, wait a minute, something's wrong with this, and that's what we look at. That's that cool piece of data that says, okay, I get it. That is an anomaly. So keep looking for those things. But it takes months and months of data in order to do that.
I'm sure. So when you're giving these devices, these MUPAS devices to experiencers, they're using it. Is it a wearable device, or do they keep it on that?
Yeah, too. So
okay.
So this is. So we have
the mini, right?
This is the one that's the desktop, but then we also have this one that they wear.
That's cool.
So, and this has pretty much everything, but it adds in the heart rate and the fine muscle tremor. So you get tremors. So when people get agitated or they're something's going on. So what happens is that they start trembling a little bit, and this watch will actually report that trembling, so we know what their anxiety level is basically. And so that gives us a reading of whether or not what they're putting in there for their narratives. Actually, we don't even need their narratives at that point because that is the narrative.
That is.
Their blood pressure shoots up.
Right.
Basically their blood pressure shoots up, or their heart rate goes up. Their fine motor control, so their twitching goes up. We know that they're anxious at that point, and we can correlate that with something that's going on in the environment.
Right. Are you building all this equipment yourself? Or
well, no, we get these, so this is something we buy from somebody that we just put our software on.
Got it.
And this one we actually manufacture. We don't make them. We have somebody make them for us.
I got it.
And we can make them by hundreds and hundreds of these things. So
that's awesome.
Right now we have over we just crossed the 300 mark just recently. but they're all over the world.
That's
In
so
Australia,
cool.
I don't know, Josh, you could explain it. You're getting a lot of Australian people that's coming in and say that they have to figure this thing out. So I don't know why.
I spend a lot of time camping. I tend to go camping by myself a lot, and I go backpacking in the Australian bush, and I meet a lot of other campers and hikers who, the moment the conversation goes anywhere remotely close to UFO, their ears perk up, and you'll have two reactions. One reaction will be, I'm going to bed. Don't want to talk about it. And the other reaction will be them really fishing to see how open you are, you know, to their experience that they obviously want to share. And there's a lot of stuff happening here. Like I've funnily enough, you know, I've had one experience in Australia, but I've seen a couple of strange things, but they've all happened to me when I've been in America, not in Australia. And but I keep meeting people here who are doing stuff, who are seeing crazy things and having crazy experiences. And I'm actively going out and camping in these areas, just sort of watch the skies. And I've started doing meditation out there because I attended a CE5 event last year for the first time. And I'm planning to maybe attend another one soon because I'm very curious about it all. But yeah, there is something going on. There's something in the waters down here at the moment. I would say the last year I've just seen a real spike in local reportings.
Well, the people that I've been working with, I mean, they're just constantly every day. It's like something new. They would do like every week or so they would do that. But they have a core of people that they get together, and ironically, a lot of these people are not together. I mean, C5s are supposed to be like you sit around in a group, but now they're just more. They're spread out over not a big area, but just a finite area. And they're getting very similar results and things like that. So very interesting. And then one of the interesting things that we decided to do is that the watch is great, but we made this little guy. It's a battery-powered device that basically completely, you don't need anything. You don't need Wi-Fi. You don't need anything. And this thing will run for 24 hours. So you just basically put this in your backpack, and it just records. And of course, you know, you're going to be bouncing around, you're going to be moving around, so this has got a lot of stuff, but that all gets flushed out with the filters. Like he says, look, you know, I know what walking is like. That's not an anomaly.
So is that a plug it in and upload the data device?
It's as soon as it gets near anything, it either gets near your phone that's a hotspot or some Wi-Fi that you told it, it'll just automatically update. You don't do anything. You just
These are really excellent devices. Like the user experience is amazing. I can't imagine doing a CE5 event or having an experience and then having to think to myself, shit, I better press a button on that machine. I think it's like, they're so well designed.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been doing now because of the Australian people, I mean, they've been amazing. They want to have a report. So what they'll do is that we gave them a special thing to say, okay, I had my CE5 during this time. It'll go through and just isolate that data for that and do a deep dive on all the anomalies. And you go into, you know, there's so many AI tools out there. It's amazing. You say, okay, find me anomalies in the data and report. And then we give a report. And so now they don't have to worry about the data because they get a report that they can like do whatever they do. I have no idea what they do with the data, but you know, they have they've been accumulating their data.
That's so neat. Oh,
it must be very reassuring and a little bit validating for people to be taken seriously in this space, you know, and to have someone come in and say, let's get the data because there's data there. So yeah, that must be a wonderful experience for people who've had these experiences and haven't really been able to understand why.
Well, you go to these conferences and I think we were talking about this before. It's no longer a question of, is it really happening? I mean, everybody at the conference is like, okay, we get it. It is happening. Let's just, let's forget about all that other, stuff and let's go figure this thing out.
We also mentioned too how traumatic that some of these experiences can be for people, and I've never really had a true experience. I don't believe. There's been a little baby one that I haven't shared on the podcast yet that I maybe will at some point. But I've talked to a lot of people that I can tell that it's so traumatic to them, and I can't imagine going through life experiencing something like this and having to kind of like hide from it your whole life, because people are so judgmental about it. And to have devices like this, that's probably why people are so interested in the data, Jim, is because I had the CE5. When I experienced something, let me see it. Oh, look, there's a correlation. It gives them like hope, I think, as well as on top of all the other scientific, figuring out what this is. I think just on a personal level, it's hopeful.
So just ironic. Just wanted to follow up on that. So we did two studies have gone through. So in 2018, I started the first study that went for 3 years, and then we just kicked off another study. In the first study, we had 30 people. One of the participants in that study, they were having just a horrible time. Almost the whole family, not everybody in the family, but almost the whole family was having these very profound experiences that basically scared the crap out of them. Mm-hmm. They're very, very nice family, but they were afraid to get in the car because they thought maybe they would go catatonic or something like that. Yeah. So when they got in the study, they started to use this thing and the system and putting their narratives in and documenting all this other stuff. And they got a grip on it. They made it part of their life as opposed to being, controlling their lives.
Right.
And then when I shut I shut it down after 3 years, Hal stopped paying for it. They came back and said, "What the hell are you doing? You can't do that. I need it." So what they promised is that if we do ever fire it back up again, that they would fund, because they're very wealthy also, they would fund anybody going forward. So all these devices they pay for to have people, if they're going to enter the study, they pay for the actual device. So,
wow.
So that's an instance where it's like, it changed their lives. It made them so they can actually experience without having to have all the animosity about it. And they said, "Look, screw it. I'm going to help people. I want other people to have the same ability to be one with it, basically." But then on the flip side, you get these people that are just scared to death of it, and they just try to find ways of getting rid of it. So one of the things we do, I don't know if I just want to show you something. So one of the things we do is we offer to all the people that are in there peer support. So we say, look, you could talk to peer people, because there's a lot of people that are really scared of this stuff. You talk to a peer support group. You can sit in a group, in a chat room and talk. We can also sit with just a person and talk one-on-one with somebody, or you can talk to somebody that's doing just a face-to-face. A lot of these people just have a horrible time with it. And we use a lot of people from the Reddit. I don't know if you ever talked to one of the moderators, personally, but they talk to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and they do it on a no judgment. And it's like, I just want to help you, tell you about my experience so you can get through your day, basically. So we basically built that into our system so people can come in and just like say, "Okay, what's going on?"
Amazing. I actually love that you have that peer support. I mean, I think that's a huge element to it, and dare I say, maybe even like a critical element to it, because I wonder. I mean, CE5 has it involves an intention, right? You're trying to like meditate and bring it in, right? And I wonder how much like consciousness affects these things. If I don't know, it's a really interesting thing, and I think having that support is critical. It really is.
And then there's that, I don't know if you ever heard the term Hitchhiker Effect.
Yeah.
It's something that I learned when I was on Skinwalker. It's like, you hear it the first time, you say, "Yeah, that's crap." Before I even started any of this, I started hearing that. And as you start hearing the stories and looking at the data and seeing the medical reports of family members that had something go on. In fact, a family that had the profound one that I was talking about, the main person of the family was on Skinwalker Ranch. He then went home, and his children started having these experiences and having these medical effects. And his wife actually started having it. So it's like all this crazy crap happening.
Man.
So it's a real thing. So, it's a scary thing.
It is. Whew. Okay, I want to transition to AI, I think, a little bit. We've been beating around the bush a little bit, and I'll share this a little bit, that one of the first things I did with this podcast is I actually created an AI agent. This is it's probably about a year ago or so, probably, that I did this, because ChatGPT was powerful, but it wasn't powerful enough for what I wanted to do. So I created this agent using Python, where I would link APIs to it. So I would have like PubMed, Semantic Scholar, Black Vault. It was maybe like 5 to 10 APIs that I connected to. And what I would do is I would talk to an experiencer. I would transcribe the MP3 with Whisper, OpenAI Whisper, and then I would give that transcript to the bot. And what it would do is it would go through the whole transcript, the whole conversation. It would pick out the anomalies of what they're claimed. Then it would kind of formulate questions of how we would figure out if that or what that anomaly is. And then it would go out and search all these APIs and try to find like peer-reviewed papers to
that's a
kind
great
of
idea.
Justify like what these are, right?
That's a good idea.
Thank you. And then it would actually give me back a scientific paper that had peer-reviewed sources, and it would have like an abstract and all the stuff. Like, it would just be a scientific paper of that person's experience, like as if someone went out and researched it. And then that would give me a chatbot that I can talk to, and then I would ask it questions about that experience and record it and then put it in the episode. So when I learned about MUPAS and I learned about the AI stuff, I got really excited because, to truth be told, I've kind of not given up. I called the AI bot Scully after the X-Files because I thought that was a funny name.
Nice.
But I've kind of put a pause on it. I'll put it that way, because AI is moving so quickly right now that OpenAI has this deep research feature that basically does exactly what I did with Scully before the deep research thing was even the thing. I mean, they've got hundreds of programmers probably on OpenAI that are developing this that are way smarter than I am. So keeping up is near impossible. So I guess my question to you would be, like, what AI platform are you using, if you're open to sharing that? Like, and how are you using it to, once it has all this data? I know you said you're scrubbing every night, there's automated processes and stuff that are happening. But how much human involvement is there? I mean, there's probably like 10 questions in the statement, but I guess just how are you using it, I guess, would be my first general thing.
So I think I told you this before. There is no physical way someone's going to sit down and do this by hand. You need to use the tools available in the current technological level. And sure enough, I mean, you're talking about two things, right? Time series data, which is coming from the devices. You have other data, which is a lot of data from, like, what's the weather, what's the this. So you're pulling from a lot of sites and stuff like that. And then all the narratives. So you have all these advanced LLMs that you can use to kind of get out. So the first thing we do is we do a PII, right? So we take every single narrative, we just completely wipe it full of anything personal. And we got a lot of stringent rules. I mean, nothing goes through. Of course, anytime you scrub, you run the risk of losing data, but that's the first step. So we scrub it with it's just removing all the personal data, basically. And then we go do a sentiment analysis, where we go through, we have 3 different sentiment models. One's a Facebook model, by the way, that goes through and just says, okay, here is what the person was feeling during these. We break it down by, first of all, the whole document, then just paragraphs. This is what they were anxious, they were scared, they were telling somebody else's story. You can get all the sentiment. Anyway, once you do that, then you can classify them as, you basically get your exactly what you were doing. Here you're pulling out your trigger words and things like that, and understanding what they're saying. So you could break it down, believe it or not, down to maybe 30 words or 30 different things. 30 different things that they were saying.
And so you're like, it's audio recording. So you're basically like live monitoring.
No, this is all. Actually, we don't have audio, so this is all typed.
They describe what's happening.
Narrate it. So when they do their incident reports, they can narrate into it. Of course, your web browsers can do that. That was something that we wanted to do, is actually add in actual voice. We're starting to do that on the phone, where we can record it and then upload it and then pull it out and stuff like that. But we don't have that sophistication yet. But right now, it's all just narratives. Right now, we have 40,000 narratives from people that have been entered into the model. So what we do then is we take that model, and with the data and everything like that, and then we train a OpenAI. We fine-tune an OpenAI model with what we have gathered, and we get the Reddit data for the day and stuff like that. So, like, for instance, I can come over here and I can ask the AI agent. So what are the places where experiencers claim? Now this is all from the 40,000 so I'm going to ask a model that we train. We didn't train it. We fine tuned it on all the 40,000 entries and some of the Reddit stuff. So we'd say, okay, watch it proves me wrong. So I'm just asking a question, and then it gives you. So this is all based upon what experiencers had said in their narratives, on top of what OpenAI already had in there, and it just fine tunes it to what whatever happens to be in the data. So here's one of the questions that we ask it. I mean, so we have a bunch of questions and then when people get in the study, our OpenAI bill is actually quite high. But people pound the crap out of this thing, and they constantly are asking a question, things like that. So you can not only ask a person, you can actually ask a trained model based upon their data, their scrub data, from all 300 people basically. It's like an amalgamation of all that data, and just ask it questions. And this is what this is kind of the thing that we say, okay, if we give this to another scientist, let's say there's a scientist out there in the world like that got a little bit of funding and wants to do some research. Okay, here's a data source that allows you to ask it questions. What's the typical, there's a couple other questions that I like to ask it. Let me just find another question here, this is cool. I like this question.
This whole thing is insanely cool.
It really is.
Well, you have to realize that I've been doing this for 10 years, so this evolved over many years. This is going to have a problem with it. Oh, no, actually. So, what is the most common UFO sightings? And this all came from people's narratives plus whatever OpenAI had originally. And it'll just tell you. So you can ask it any question you want, and it'll just go and give you a whole bunch of data and stuff like that, which you can play around with and do all sorts of stuff. Man. So anyway, you give people the ability to understand what's going on, and I think that's super, super important, is give them the power to understand what's happening in their life so they can either, if they want to, come to terms with it and live with it and not be scared of it, or just be curious about it. Say, what the hell's going on? So another thing that we say to people is, look, if you see something weird, and then what we do is we say, okay, well, here, circle it, and then write a narrative about it, whatever, you say whatever you want to say, and then the computer looks at that and it says, okay, well, that's interesting. Every time I see something like that, I'm going to ping off it. So there's so many different ways you can basically get data that an AI model can look for. So that's what we're doing, just collecting data, basically. And then what we want to do is be able to get this out to people that are going to use it. So I want to publish off of it. We're going to have other scientists that want to publish off of it. So it's like getting all this data put together to form basically a unified data source for experimentation to understand what's going on.
I mean, the possibilities here are endless.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Just as a quick idea, I know you're not here yet, but imagine if you can identify when these three things happen. When the gyroscope goes crazy and the magnetometer goes off and the heart rate goes up, the chances of it detecting a UAP or something like that, it goes up dramatically. These are the three factors that seem to be triggered when this happens. I mean, this might be uncomfortable for some people. Maybe they wouldn't want to do this, but imagine if they were wearing a GoPro or something that went without even identifying or making a noise or anything. It just it triggers the GoPro to start recording. And then now you're starting to get visual data on top of all the other stuff too.
So some of these, I don't know if this one does. Oh, this one. Oh, it's late. So this is a device it's one of our test devices, and this is a camera. So what this thing will do is it'll go and look for anomalies. Like I said, remember I said it could be a bird. So this will look for anomalies in the sky and marry it to what's going on with the narratives and stuff like that. So that's what they said. They plug this thing in the back and they could put cameras on it and stuff. And plus the phone does that. So you can actually, if you see something weird, you can take a picture of it and stuff like that.
Right.
But, that's what you have to do. It's not like any other kind of data that happens continuously. You can say, okay, well, I'm going to put my sensor in there and I'm going to record it all day long. Yeah. It only happens once or twice, maybe every other month.
Right.
A lot of these people, the periodicity of it happening is probably Never a month. I mean, so it's usually more than a month. Then they'll have another one. They'll have small ones, and then they'll have these big, profound ones where you actually start seeing stuff. So we actually taking pictures of orbs that flying, not on this particular camera, but we have probably 10% of the devices we have out there have added a camera to it, and they point it outside. They look up in the sky that they think is like, in their horizon or something. We've actually picked up some interesting things.
Is that data public, or is it still just private because it's part of your research?
Well, it's public okay, so that's interesting. So we have a bunch of public devices. These are all devices that are like, we have Hesselden, we have devices there, we have devices in Rushden Forest, we have Hesselden Valley, we have the Blind Frog Ranch, we have them all over, a lot of stuff all over the world. We have devices. So people can go and they can look at these things all day long. Thunderstrike Ranch, we have one at. So if you get into the study, you can go and look at all of these things in real time and comment on them and look at the videos and stuff like that and see all the crazy stuff going on there. But the personal devices are very personal. You actually have to get invited in by the owner of the device. Like if you wanted to see somebody's device, they would have to invite you in.
Sure.
Some of this stuff is especially the incidences are so personal. It's like we don't even read them. I don't read them. I mean, you can't read 40,000 of them. So the AI completely scrubs them, throws them in there, and then on top of that, so in order to do this for the general public, you have to have what they call an IRB, which is a review board that actually governs how you take and store and disseminate the data. So we use Harvard's IRB. We have a Harvard professor that's working with us that's doing a lot of the narrative analysis and things like that. And then so we're using the Harvard IRB. So we actually are under the auspice of that IRB, which says, here's really strict rules on what we can do. And then it all goes up to the cloud, which is all HIPAA based. And so once it gets up there, it's protected up by Azure's HIPAA, whatever the heck they got up there.
Yeah.
It's, their firewalls and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually what I do for my 9 to 5 is that kind of stuff. So I'm very familiar with Azure and all the legalities with that. It can get expensive though too. So
very expensive.
I'd imagine
people don't realize. Yeah,
they don't. And then when you start doing AI stuff with those tokens and it can be. I mean, you're doing such great work here. I could even just tell as a tech guy, like this website is built so well. Like the response times, everything. Like I don't know who's doing that for you, but it's just next level stuff. I'm very much impressed.
But it didn't happen overnight. It happened over years and years. It started out very crude. It's like, and then as you go along, people say, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if?"
Yeah.
I say, "Oh, that's a great idea."
You keep iterating,
next iteration, it goes in, and and then like the CE5 thing, the one that we gave the ability to people that are saying we're doing a CE5, so they can click into their portal and say, okay, record this. They usually do it for like about a 4 or 5 hour period. Record for this and give me an analysis. So we added that. That's the last thing we just added. So it's like it just evolves and evolves.
Yeah. So what is the end game, would you say, with this? Like, are you obviously I would imagine it would be to figure out what all this stuff is, but would the next milestone to be? I think you said you're trying to get published, right? Is that the next big thing?
So we have a couple hypotheses floating around now that we're trying to prove. One of them actually you mentioned, where we feel that, and we actually have data supporting that. Regional people that are close by, will sync up and have similar experiences during similar times, almost like they were entangled in some way. Can't explain exactly the mechanism that actually happens, but it turns out that people, like for instance across the world, will start getting hooked up, although they never even met each other, never even talked to each other. They start syncing, and then we don't understand why the hell that's happening. In the Uinta Basin, where the Skinwalker Ranch is and Blind Frog is, we had 2 or 3 people that actually ended up like syncing within a half an hour. They actually started having similar experiences. They never even met each other. So one of the hypotheses is that whatever this thing is, this community, this conscious community that we're all playing in, I have no idea what it is. It seems to stretch all over the world, and people actually can get linked up without with entanglement. You have to actually physically be next to each other to get entangled initially. This seems to completely not have to have that happen. So that's one of the hypotheses we're trying to prove. Once we prove that, then that'll go to print. One of the other things that we want to print is methodology. Once you come up with a 5 sigma thing, you have to let other people do the exact same experiment, not the exact same way, but the exact same experiment, so we can prove it. So you want 2 people doing it. So that's another thing. We're going to do a process paper.
So cool. Yeah, I firmly believe that consciousness at this point doesn't generate in our brain. I think we connect to it. I think there's been a lot of evidence of that. So I'm behind that general hypothesis you're putting forth with like CE5 and the entanglement stuff. Like it makes sense that there's like a field of consciousness. I might cut this out of the episode. I'm not sure, but I just want to mention it because it's fresh on my mind. Are you familiar with the DMT laser experiment at all?
No.
So this is actually I'll try to keep this brief, but we actually just released an episode about this. Was it yesterday, Josh? I think it was yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
So DMT is this molecule that our brain creates. It happens when we die or when we're like near-death experiences. Our brain releases this molecule that makes us like almost hallucinate. And there's a way to smoke it. So voluntarily, that was as like a psychedelic, like a LSD kind of thing, right? So, but it's what's the term? Is it androgynous, where when your body produces it naturally? So it's not like psilocybin where you're taking a mushroom and it's foreign to your body. Your body, this is a natural molecule that your body produces. Anyway, so people take this drug recreationally, but there's this guy. His name's Danny Goler, and this is a longer story, but he basically feels like he was pointed in a direction. And what that direction showed him is that he took a diffracted laser, a red laser, and shined it on his wall. And then he smoked DMT, and he looked at the laser while on DMT, and he saw what he could only describe as like a parallel universe. Like it almost as if the laser was opening up and you were seeing a different world. And and in that world there were structures, and in those structures were these little pixels, and these pixels had code on them. So the catchphrase is that if you smoke DMT and look at a laser, you see the source code of the universe. And the interesting thing is Danny is not he's not a scientist, but he's going at this in a very scientific way. So he's trying to get like double blinds. He's trying to like thousands of people have done this experiment and claim to see the same thing. And you also don't need a lot of DMT to see it. Anyway, the punchline is Josh actually did the experiment. We actually recorded it live, and Josh took DMT and looked at this laser, and he saw some very interesting things. And it seems to be like a repeatable experiment that you can do. The obvious problem here is perception, because you're just everyone. Allegedly, we could all smoke DMT and look at a laser. We can kind of see the same structures and the same things. So it's not like it's like a shared hallucination, I guess you could say, in that way. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, Josh, but am I saying it correctly, sort of?
Yeah, I think it's. I think this is true of psychedelics in general, and why I think it's kind of interesting. And I was planning to ask you about this, Jim, if this is something you'd ever looked into. But the CE5 protocol and seems to be about putting yourself into this altered state of consciousness and meditating. And we know that psychedelics get you to an altered state of consciousness very quickly. And I just wondered if there was any research done on reading spikes or things in people who are maybe in these induced altered states of consciousness as a result of a psychedelic. But yeah, DMT is probably the strongest, and there seems to be a consistent experience people have under certain circumstances that's pretty challenging to explain. And I think it's, they're doing a lot more research in it, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But yeah, has there been any from your end? Like, is the psychedelic experience one at all that you think should be considered?
Well, yeah, I don't. The protocol that's been followed for the C5s that I'm familiar with is natural things. So they do it, but they started wearing these things. These are the MUPAS devices, which measures all of your 5 different brain waves. So we're actually recording that through the network as well. So during their CE5, a couple people are wearing this, and a couple people are wearing the watch. So a couple people are wearing the watch, and that's what's going into the data. So yeah, we're looking at the brain alterations of the brain waves of the brain functions during these things, and trying to correlate them with their narratives to see when the interesting stuff starts to actually happen, when they actually see something. What is actually going on in the brain. So
there is,
and I'm sure
there is on DMT a shared experience that involves meeting beings, and that's something I think I'd be really fascinated to see what's going on in the brain during those sorts of experiences, because people who have that experience and who may not at all be familiar with CE5 or any UAP stuff at all, what they describe as their experience can sometimes be eerily similar to an abduction encounter or a physical encounter in a bedroom or something. And it's been hard to kind of ignore that similarity personally, but no, that's just the DMT laser experiment. I think is going to be an interesting one as the research continues in that space. Cool. Yeah, I think the guys at DOPS are even. I was reading something on the DOPS website, the Division of Perceptual Studies. They were talking about incorporating DMT into their research now for this year. So I think we'll see some more serious research going into the.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's out of the University of Virginia. I think, is that right? DOPS. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, out of their school of medicine. Yeah,
it's really cool. I think we have to do the DMT laser experiment again, but with these MUPAS devices. If that's something you would be interested in, drop a comment down below and we'll see if we can make it happen. Next, I wanted to talk to Dr. Segala about disclosure, because he's clearly putting a lot of his effort into gathering this information with the goal of eventually disclosing something himself. And there was even a moment where he talked about seeing a video from Homeland Security that was pretty compelling that I'm still thinking about to this day. So here's the conversation with Dr. Segala about disclosure. So when you say disclosure, like what piece of information or what test do you think you would want released first? Because it seems like the government has something. I know that President Trump had ordered the release of the UFO files and things like that recently. But if you had to pick, like, from your study and your research, like, is there one thing that you would want to see released first?
Well, so I'm working with Hal. So Hal, for 15 years, tried to get physical materials out of the storage areas. And they're supposedly all over the military bases. It came pretty close to actually having somebody say, "Yeah, go get them," and then of course it always got shut down. So I would believe that if the government had that stuff, he would have them. I think he would, of all the people, he would have had an easy time. So I don't know if there's a lot of that, but there's a lot of really good instances of military aircrafts and stuff like that. So I think the military aircrafts, their reports, and some of maybe the TSA stuff, or not TSA, the just regular, just commercial airline stuff that they've kept hidden would be great to have released first. And then of course, poor Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée had done an amazing job correlating all this material from MUFON and all this other kind of stuff. He lost it to the government. The government scooped it and said, "You're never going to have it." Love to have that back, because that is rich data from real experiences that came in. So, and that's really good information that can go right. So, Jacques Vallée's data, which got squished, and then all of the stuff from the military encounters. Because you get, the Nimitz is great and all this other stuff that they saw, but you have to realize that that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. There must be hundreds of really good ones that they don't want to release.
Yeah,
that's the good stuff.
I agree. I think I get the sense, and maybe I'm wrong here, but man, wouldn't it be awesome if they just release a boatload of information. Like not just
And
one
videos.
not just one little video of a little orb flying, or like, but just like, I'm talking like hundreds of videos, just like the whole enchilada, just like, here it is. I think that would be like true disclosure, because
At maximum resolution too, please.
yes,
Well, yeah, because Homeland Security has a lot of drones in the air, and they're recording. And I know for a fact they have recorded a lot of stuff, and their drones are really good. Better than actually like the fighter planes, because they're. But those drones are capturing things that they didn't expect, and I know that I looked at some of the stuff when I from working with Travis Taylor and those guys, and they came up with some really crazy stuff. So of course, anything that we see as citizens is the tip of the iceberg. There must be some amazing stuff that they've captured with really good high-res cameras, but they also have really good infrared cameras, because they're looking infrared for, the Homeland Security is looking for infrared stuff on the borders and stuff.
Yeah.
So they got some really, really good high-quality cameras.
yeah. Have you ever seen anything working with Hal or Travis Taylor, anyone that you can talk about that was like pretty crazy?
Yeah, so there was this. There was a conference in Vernal that I went to that they showed us these videos from Homeland Security. It was basically got from them that they didn't understand what it was. It was like these crafts going across the sky and things like that. So they asked our opinions, stuff like that. I said, well, that's very hard to explain. I mean, you could probably go on the edge and say, oh, somebody made it up, But if you say, okay, well, this came from a military aircraft, they're flying. I don't know. I forgot what aircraft they're flying, whatever their helicopters are flying. I mean, these are legit. You can see they have all of the insignias. They have all of the telemetry sitting on the screens.
Yeah.
So it came from their stuff.
And if there's a chain of custody too that traces back.
And there's a chain of custody. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, there was a chain of custody.
Yeah.
So they had a whole conference on that. I got invited to be on the panel to talk about it. And it was like, and Travis was there too. So we looked at it and said, holy crap, that's weird.
What do they look like? What are the
Well,
crowds?
just things going across that seem to not, that they would change directions. If you take something that cruises across the sky, it's a possibility of being a satellite, or it could be anything. But it's things that change direction that you just can't seem to understand how it changed directions. That makes you kind of think, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I've seen that before too. Where it's like a little dot in the sky, a little orb, whatever you call it, and just like all of a sudden, whoop, it changes. You're like, what?
Yep.
What the heck?
And then they have these thermal imagery that you look at it, you say, well, wait a minute, why is it so cold on the device and hot outside the device? And so it just doesn't make, some of the stuff just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think we'll get disclosure? Like, do you think that it's coming, or do you?
I think Trump's going to make sure. Damn it, I want. Yeah, I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna push it. He's gonna let a lot of pushback, but I don't think he gives a crap about pushback.
No, I don't think he does either, and I think he probably wants to be the guy to do it. That's what
he wants to be like.
Yeah,
because Obama actually looked at the stuff, and he came really close to being disclosure. So he's a big proponent of this stuff too. So with those two guys, you're good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is interesting. I don't know. I hope it happens. I really do. I think that it probably will. Are you concerned at all about like the ontological shock? Like if they do release these things and there's not a question anymore that there's something visiting us, whether it be where it comes from, maybe debatable, whether it be extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, parallel universe, whatever. But do you think, are you worried at all about like society, kind of not knowing?
I mean, it probably is going to be mostly anecdotal. So it's still going to be big question marks, but better question marks. I kind of feel that the data that we get is still going to be the same from, like the Nimitz. I mean, if you look at that video, it didn't really have a lot of extra data, so you really couldn't do, well, I don't really know that for a fact, because I only saw what everybody else saw. Who knows? Is it going to be definitive data? Probably not. Like, the little green men live on this street over here. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
But who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
But President Trump did say he saw some really cool stuff. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to see that. The frustrating part is that I think we all know that they have something. Like it's clear and obvious now, and you know, it's just frustrating. I imagine it's frustrating for you too, because you're out there. You know, I guess you could say in the private sector, you get me borderline a little bit. You know, you touched government stuff a little bit, I guess, right? But you know, if they have data that could help you in your mission with the MUPAS device and all that stuff, like, isn't it so frustrating that they haven't released it? You know, it's crazy. It's, man.
But you have to work with what you got. So I'm gonna move forward until they say, okay, well, look here now, or this is what we saw. So I'm gonna point my camera over there now.
If you've ever had an experience or sincerely think that you might, this is your chance to do something about it, to stop just wondering and to actually be a part of the data. Dr. Segala is actively looking for participants for his ongoing research. So if this is something that you feel like you want to explore, you can scan the QR code that's right here, fill out some forms, and have an opportunity to be included in his research. Because at the end of the day, this only works if people like you are willing to step forward.